It was just another networking event. Or so I thought. 3 years ago, my life fell apart in a hotel parking lot. Now I stood at a corporate conference, plastic badge swinging from my neck, nursing a drink at one of those painfully polite mixers, when I heard the sound that made the whole room stop. Someone sobbing. And when I turned, I saw her. Lauren, my ex-wife. Let me back up. 3 years earlier, Lauren had shattered my life like it meant nothing. We were married for 8 years. 8 years of building, dreaming, laughing, and in the final months, me wondering why she was always working late. Why she had a new gym membership in a city she claimed to hate. Why she guarded her phone like it was the nuclear codes. I wasn't stupid, but I was hopeful. And honestly, I was kind of pathetic back then. I gave her every excuse. I chalked it up to stress, to hormones, to just needing space. She said she'd be out of town for a girls' weekend, and I believed her. But I wasn't ready for what I saw when I showed up at that same hotel by coincidence. I'd been there for a client meeting, different floor, different ballroom. Afterward, I passed the lobby and saw her, dressed like she was going on a honeymoon, holding hands with Dylan, my old boss. The moment our eyes met, she froze. He looked confused. I didn't say anything. I just walked out. She didn't chase after me. She didn't call. 2 days later, I got divorce papers in the mail. No explanation. No note. Just a signature and instructions for mediation. I moved out of the city 6 weeks later. Changed my job. Changed my number. Changed everything. She got to keep the house because I didn't want to fight. What was the point? I'd already lost something bigger than bricks and wood. Fast forward to now, this networking event. I wasn't even supposed to be there. But my current firm had merged with a larger corporation, and I was invited at the last minute to fill in for a colleague. So I came, slapped on the name tag, smiled at people I didn't know, and then I saw her. She didn't see me at first. She was with a small group, laughing at something some guy said, probably trying to network her way to the top again. But then she turned, and she saw me. Her wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Her mouth opened like she wanted to speak, but couldn't. Then she just collapsed into a chair and began crying. Everyone stopped. Dozens of eyes turned toward us. She kept whispering something under her breath. I couldn't make it out. I just stood there, frozen. And then she said it loud enough for me, and everyone, to hear. I thought you were gone forever. The man beside her looked like he'd seen a ghost. A few people awkwardly moved away. Someone grabbed her arm and asked if she needed help. She just kept crying. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I felt curious. Because the woman who tossed me aside like trash 3 years ago had just publicly crumbled at the mere sight of me. And I had no idea why. But I was about to find out. I didn't approach her right away. That would have been too easy, too expected. Instead, I stayed across the room, sipping my drink like I hadn't just witnessed the most surreal moment of my adult life. People kept glancing between us, whispering, wondering who I was and why the polished woman in designer heels had unraveled like a broken dam. But I didn't flinch. I wanted her to feel that silence. The same silence she left me with the day she disappeared. A few minutes later, she got up and walked briskly toward the hallway, brushing away tears with the back of her hand. That's when my curiosity got the better of me. I followed, not close enough to seem desperate, but just enough to keep her in sight. She turned a corner and ducked into an empty conference room. I waited a beat. Then I walked in. She was pacing like a trapped animal, her lipstick smudged, breathing sharp and uneven. When she saw me, she froze again. "Ethan," she said, and that was it. Just my name. Like it had a weight she hadn't realized until that moment. I stood in the doorway, hands in my pockets, calm on the outside, thunderstorm on the inside. "Didn't think I'd ever see you again," she added. "Likewise," I said. Didn't expect to be greeted with a meltdown. She gave a short, bitter laugh and looked down at the floor. "You probably think I deserve that." "I don't think anything," I said, but it was a lie. I thought a lot of things. I thought about how she left without an ounce of guilt. I thought about Dylan. I thought about the 8 years of my life that she erased like a chalkboard. She leaned on the edge of the table and finally looked up. Her eyes were swollen, and for the first time in years, she looked small. Not the proud, confident Lauren I remembered, but someone cornered by consequences. "I didn't leave because I didn't love you," she said. "I left because I thought I'd already ruined us." I laughed, coldly, uncontrollably. "No, Lauren. You ruined us the moment you walked into that hotel room with my boss." She flinched like I'd hit her. But I didn't care. I was done protecting her feelings. For once, I wanted the truth. The whole truth. And she gave it. Turns out, she and Dylan didn't last long. Just a few months. Apparently, he was using her to get leverage over me in some shady promotion I never even knew I was in the running for. Once I left the company, he dropped her like a hot stone and made a deal with the board that got him fired 6 months later. She'd gambled everything, her marriage, her dignity, on a man who treated her like a pawn. By the time she realized it, it was too late. I had cut all ties. She tried calling, emailing, even came by my old office, but I was already gone. What she didn't know was that I'd been watching. Quietly. From a distance. Just to make sure she didn't try to mess with my finances or reputation. But emotionally, I was gone. Dead inside where she was concerned. She told me she'd spent the last 3 years trying to rebuild her life. New job, new apartment, new therapist. But no new love. Not one. Because she said no one else compared to what we had. That's not romantic, Lauren, I said quietly. That's just sad. She looked at me like she wanted me to say more. To take her hand. To rescue her from the mess she'd created. But I didn't. I turned to leave. And then she said something that made me stop cold. I never told you the full story about that night. About why I was even with Dylan. You think it was betrayal, but it was something else. Something worse. I turned back slowly. Worse. She nodded, her face suddenly pale. You weren't the only one who got betrayed, Ethan. You were just the only one who walked away. My stomach tightened. The room felt smaller. What are you talking about? She glanced toward the closed door, as if checking no one was listening. And then she whispered. He blackmailed me. Everything inside me stopped. The word hit me like a slap. Blackmail? I stared at her, half expecting her to burst into laughter and say it was a twisted joke. But she didn't. Her eyes welled up again, and this time, I saw something that hadn't been there before: fear. What do you mean he blackmailed you? I asked, my voice low and sharp. She sat down slowly, hands trembling slightly. After that conference in Chicago, remember? The one where you had to fly out early because your mother was in the hospital? I stayed back an extra day. That's when it started. I said nothing, just watched her. She went on. Dylan invited me for a drink. I thought it was harmless. He was your boss, and I figured we'd just talk about your promotion, maybe put in a good word. But he wasn't interested in business. He started making comments about how I looked, how lonely I must be with you always traveling. I tried to leave, but he grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but enough to scare me. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I left. I clenched my jaw. The idea of him putting a hand on her made my stomach twist, no matter how much pain she'd caused me later. But that wasn't the end, she said. The next week, he sent me a message. Said he had photos of us together outside the bar. Made it seem like we were on a date. And he implied that if I didn't cooperate, he'd tell you that I was cheating. Even worse, he said he'd frame it like I'd been sleeping with him for months, ruin your reputation at work. I stepped back. So your solution was to actually sleep with him? Tears rolled down her cheeks. No, not at first. I ignored him for weeks. But then I found out he had sent something to your senior manager, something vague, but enough to stir gossip. HR opened a file on you. Remember when you told me they started acting weird at meetings? I did. It was around the time my chances at a major internal promotion just vanished, and no one could explain why. I panicked, she whispered. I met with him to make it stop. I thought if I just pretended to be interested, maybe I could talk him out of it. But he recorded our conversation, twisted it, threatened to release that too. Eventually, I broke. I agreed to go away with him once. Just once. And yes, that was the night you saw us at the hotel. I was speechless. Everything I'd believed for years had just been shattered and rearranged into something even darker. She didn't just cheat, she was manipulated into destroying both of us. I wanted to be furious, to scream. But all I could feel in that moment was exhaustion. So you let me walk away thinking you chose him, I said quietly. You didn't explain. Didn't try. Just sent divorce papers like I didn't matter. She shook her head, almost ashamed. You looked at me like I was poison. I didn't know how to undo that. And I figured you'd be better off hating me than knowing how broken I really was. I turned away, trying to process the weight of what she'd just said. Every memory I had of her, of that night, of those months afterward, suddenly felt like a lie wrapped around a half-truth. And you're just telling me this now? I asked. She stood, brushing her hands down her skirt, trying to regain composure. Because I never expected to see you again. But when I did, I couldn't keep it inside anymore. Not after everything I lost. There was silence between us, thick and suffocating. I don't want anything from you, Ethan, she added. Not forgiveness. Not sympathy. Just, maybe one day, you'll understand why I disappeared. I looked at her for a long time, and then I asked the question that had been burning inside me since she'd said the word blackmail. Did anyone else know what he did? Did you tell anyone? Her response was barely audible. I wasn't the only woman he did it to. My skin crawled. My fists clenched. This went deeper than just us. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about justice. And I knew I couldn't walk away this time. Not without finding out just how deep Dylan's rot had gone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my hotel room, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything she'd told me. The blackmail, the threats, the way Dylan had slithered his way through our lives like a parasite. And all the while, I'd believed I was the fool. The weak one. The husband whose wife simply stopped loving him. But now it was worse than betrayal. It was corruption, abuse, and silence woven together into a story I'd never seen coming. By morning, I had a plan. I didn't call Lauren. I didn't need to. I knew if I did, I'd get emotional again, and I couldn't afford that. I needed to be clear-headed, focused. So instead, I drove straight to my old company's headquarters, walked in like I still belonged there, and requested a meeting with one of the few people I still trusted, Angie Harper, the former HR director. She'd always been kind to me, even when I felt the walls closing in during those final weeks. She was surprised to see me, but agreed to talk. We met at a nearby cafe. I didn't waste time. I laid everything out. Not just what Lauren told me, but what I'd lived through, the confusion, the unexplained meetings canceled at the last minute, the internal rumors that tanked my promotion chances. Angie sat back, listening with a tight jaw and eyes that flickered with recognition. When I mentioned Dylan's name, her expression hardened. Ethan, she said slowly, I probably shouldn't say this, but you weren't the only one who got burned by him. And your wife wasn't the first woman he got close to outside the office either. That's when it clicked. There had been whispers even before I left. I remembered seeing Dylan having late dinners with junior staffers, always women, always in secluded spots. But I had brushed it off, trusted that the man above me in the corporate ladder at least knew the line he wasn't supposed to cross. He was investigated once, Angie admitted, but no one came forward with hard proof. One woman, an intern, filed a complaint, but she withdrew it suddenly. It was all hush-hush. HR couldn't move forward, and the board didn't want the PR mess. I leaned forward. But if there were multiple women, then maybe now's the time to reopen everything, she said, her voice firm. I hadn't expected that. But Angie wasn't one to let injustice slide. And she still had connections, deep ones. Within an hour, she was texting names to me. Women who had left the company suddenly. Women who had worked under Dylan. Women who might still be living in fear of what would happen if they spoke up. By that afternoon, I had a list. I didn't know what I was doing exactly. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an investigator. But I was someone who had once loved a woman who'd been pulled into something vile. And I knew I couldn't walk away from this. Not now. I called Lauren. I'm not forgiving you, I told her. But if what you said is true, we're not done with this. Not by a long shot. She sounded surprised, but grateful. Whatever you need. I'll tell everything. I'll testify. Good, I said. Because I'm going after him. She was quiet for a long beat. Then she whispered, Ethan, there's something else you should know before you go any further. I rolled my eyes. Of course there is. What now? Dylan, he had help. The line went silent, and the hairs on the back of my neck rose. Help from who? Her voice cracked. Someone in your old department. Someone close to you. That's how he knew so much about your travel, your schedule, your projects. That's how he always stayed 2 steps ahead. I sat frozen. She didn't need to say the name. Because in that instant, I knew exactly who she meant. And it made my blood run cold. I sat in the driver's seat of my rental car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The name kept circling in my head like a vulture over something rotten. Mark Dalton. My closest friend at the company. The guy who trained me when I first started. The one I confided in during those long hours when the job consumed my life. I told him everything, when Lauren and I were fighting, when I suspected something was off, even when I considered switching departments. He was the last person I ever expected to betray me. But it all made sense now. Mark had always seemed to know things he shouldn't. He made subtle comments about Lauren's schedule, dropped hints about company gossip I was never supposed to hear. I thought he was just connected, friendly, loyal. But loyalty, it turns out, was just a mask. I called Angie again, and her voice dropped the second I said his name. Mark, she said. You think he's involved? I'm not thinking, I said. I'm sure. Lauren just confirmed someone was feeding Dylan info from my department, and Mark was the only one close enough to know that much. Angie was quiet for a second. Then she sighed. There were rumors, Ethan. Nothing solid. But after you left, he got a big raise. Moved into a new role, even though his performance had been average. Some of us raised eyebrows, but the timing was right after Dylan got promoted. So Dylan had bought him. That coward sold me out for a better office and a few extra zeros. I felt like an idiot all over again. And suddenly, I wasn't just angry, I was focused. I spent the next few days digging. I reached out to the women Angie had put me in contact with. Most were hesitant. Some didn't respond. But two agreed to meet. One was a former intern named Brianna. The other, a marketing analyst named Haley who had transferred to a different firm across the country. Brianna broke my heart. She was barely 22 when it happened. Fresh out of college, excited to work in a prestigious firm. Dylan had taken her under his wing, then turned on her when she didn't give in to his disgusting advances. She told HR, Mark, who was supposed to be her mentor, coached her into walking back her statement. Told her it would kill her career if she pushed it. Haley's story was worse. She had given in after Dylan threatened to blacklist her from the industry. Then he dumped her and spread rumors that she had seduced him. She left the state to start fresh. Her voice still shook when she spoke about it, and the shame she carried was unbearable to witness. I told them everything, that I wasn't just another ex-employee, but someone who wanted to expose the whole mess. I showed them I wasn't here to profit, wasn't looking for revenge. I just wanted the truth on record. And then I got the most unexpected message of all. It was from Mark. I heard you've been asking around. We need to talk. Alone. I stared at the text for nearly a minute before replying. Named a time and place. He chose a diner outside the city. Quiet. Off the grid. Neutral ground. When I walked in, I half expected him to deny everything, play dumb, maybe even threaten me. But he didn't. Mark looked awful. Like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. His hair was a mess, eyes sunken, fingers twitching as he stirred his coffee. He didn't even say hello when I sat down. I didn't think you'd ever come back, he said quietly. I almost didn't, I replied. But here I am. Start talking. He nodded slowly. Dylan offered me a deal. Said if I kept tabs on you, fed him small things, when you were traveling, who you were meeting with, what you were working on, he'd make sure I moved up. Said it was just internal politics. Nothing illegal. Nothing personal. It ruined my marriage, I said. I know, he whispered, ashamed. I didn't know how far it would go. That's what everyone says after they've helped destroy someone's life. Mark closed his eyes. I kept everything. Every message, every transfer, every note he sent. I didn't delete a thing. I've been carrying it with me in case he ever turned on me too. My pulse jumped. You have proof. He nodded. A flash drive. In my car. I'll give it to you. I just want to be done with this. I leaned back, stunned. If he was telling the truth, I had the missing piece, the final weapon to destroy Dylan's carefully protected empire of manipulation and abuse. But there was one more thing I had to know. Why now? I asked. Why tell me this after all these years? Mark looked me straight in the eye. Because last month, Dylan contacted me again. He wanted dirt on someone new. And when I didn't play along, he threatened me. Said he still had leverage. That he could end me if I didn't cooperate. I narrowed my eyes. And Mark's voice dropped to a whisper. He mentioned Lauren. My blood went cold. He said he wasn't done with her yet. That was the moment I realized this wasn't over. It was just beginning. When I left that diner with the flash drive in my jacket pocket, it felt heavier than it should have. Not physically, just spiritually, emotionally. That little piece of plastic held the evidence I needed to pull the curtain back on years of deception, abuse, and betrayal. But it also meant stepping back into a past I had tried so hard to bury. I parked 2 blocks away from my hotel and sat in the car for nearly an hour before I even looked at the files. My hands trembled slightly as I connected the drive to my laptop. Dozens of folders popped up, each labeled by month and year, spanning nearly 4 years. Inside were screenshots of messages, payment records, meeting notes, even voice recordings Dylan had sent Mark through encrypted apps. I scrolled through images of bank transfers, audio clips with Dylan casually instructing Mark on how to subtly push Ethan off the promotion track, and one video file I almost didn't open until I did. It was a screen recording of a video call between Dylan and Mark, dated 2 weeks before Lauren and I divorced. Dylan was smirking, confident, his voice clear as he said, "She won't fight it. She'll sign whatever we give her. Just make sure Ethan keeps thinking she left for another man. Let that idea rot him from the inside. You'll be in line for regional lead by Q3. I had to stop the video halfway through because I thought I was going to be sick. They planned it. They orchestrated not just my downfall, but my emotional collapse, like it was a corporate strategy. I had been nothing but a pawn in a game of career politics and twisted egos. My marriage had been collateral damage. I didn't sleep that night either. And by sunrise, I knew what I had to do. I reached out to Brianna and Haley again. I told them what I had, that this wasn't just about individual experiences anymore. It was a pattern. And with Mark's evidence, we could expose it. They both agreed to come forward, but only if I went first. So I did. I scheduled a meeting with a labor attorney I knew from my new firm, a guy named Russell Crane. Old school, sharp, and relentless. I told him everything. Showed him the files. At first, he looked skeptical, like maybe I was just another bitter ex-employee on a witch hunt. But by the time we got to the recordings, his face went pale. "This is bad," he muttered. "Really bad. And not just for Dylan. This implicates your old company's leadership if they knew even half of this and did nothing." "They knew," I said flatly. Angie confirmed they buried at least one complaint. He looked me in the eye. "Are you ready for what this means?" "Absolutely not," I admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway." Within 48 hours, we'd started the process. Formal complaints, legal filings, whistleblower protections. We weren't just exposing a predator. We were shining a light on a system that enabled him. And in the middle of all that chaos, I made a decision I didn't expect. I called Lauren. She answered on the first ring. No hesitation, like she'd been waiting. "There's something you need to see," I told her. We met at a public cafe this time. No hidden corners. No empty conference rooms. She looked different, less put together, more real. No makeup. No games. When I handed her a copy of the files, her hands started to shake. "You had this the whole time?" she asked. "No. Just since yesterday. Mark gave them to me." She looked at the folder like it might explode. "I'm helping the others go public," I said. "Brianna, Haley, there are more. We're building a case." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time she didn't break down. She just nodded. "Tell me what you need me to do." I paused. "You sure?" I let fear dictate everything before. I won't do it again. I didn't trust her completely. Not yet. But I believed her fear. And I believed her regret. The following week moved faster than I expected. Headlines began to appear in quiet corners of the business world. An anonymous tip had triggered a second internal investigation. People were being questioned. Lawyers started circling. Dylan, from what I heard, had gone completely silent. But silence didn't mean safety. 3 days later, someone broke into Mark's apartment. Nothing was stolen. Just files gone. Laptops smashed. Cabinets ransacked. He called me at 3 a.m., panicked. "I think he knows we're coming." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about saving reputations anymore. This was a man fighting to keep his secrets buried, and he was willing to go to dangerous lengths to do it. We had started a war, and I wasn't sure who would make it out the other side. It was no longer just a fight for justice. It had turned into a full-blown war. The break-in at Mark's apartment proved what we feared. Dylan knew we were coming, and he wasn't going to sit still and let the walls collapse around him. He was panicking, and a panicked man with power is more dangerous than anything I'd ever faced in my life. Mark went into hiding, staying at a hotel under a fake name. I offered to help pay for security, but he refused, said it was his mess too, and he'd deal with it. I respected that, even though I could hear the cracks in his voice when he spoke. He was scared. We all were. Meanwhile, my attorney, Russell, filed a motion to preserve evidence and submitted a complaint directly to the board of directors at my old company. The media had started circling after word leaked through a former staffer at HR, and now Dylan was under intense pressure. But instead of backing down, he pushed harder. 2 of the women who had initially agreed to testify pulled out suddenly. One said her family had received threatening messages. Another was offered a suspiciously timed job opportunity if she just moved on. We knew it was Dylan's doing. He was trying to wipe the battlefield clean before the storm hit. But I refused to back off. And then Lauren called me in a voice I hadn't heard from her in years. Terrified. Shaking. Someone followed me, she said. I was walking back from the store, and I noticed a black car slowly driving behind me. When I stopped, it stopped. When I crossed the street, it crossed. I ran into a pharmacy and waited. When I came out, it was gone. Did you get a plate? No. But I know it was him. I know it. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that maybe it was paranoia. But I'd seen enough to believe her. And suddenly, the situation was more than just legal. It was personal again. I picked her up that night and brought her to my place. For the first time in 3 years, she stood in my apartment, looking around like she didn't belong. She didn't touch anything, didn't ask questions. She just sat on the edge of the couch and stared at the floor. I poured her a drink, sat across from her, and waited. After a few minutes, she finally looked up. "Do you think I'm evil?" she asked quietly. "No," I said. "I think you were weak. I think you were hurt. And I think you let someone convince you that you were powerless. That's not evil. But it broke us." She nodded slowly. "I deserve that." We didn't say much after that. She spent the night in the guest room. I locked every door and made sure nothing seemed off outside. For the first time, I wasn't guarding just myself anymore. The next morning, things got worse. Russell called with news. Someone had attempted to block our filing. A counter-complaint had been submitted, accusing me and the other witnesses of conspiring to extort Dylan for money and career revenge. It was absurd, completely fabricated, but it had teeth because Dylan had power and connections. And in the court of public opinion, it only takes one well-timed story to flip everything. I felt sick, but Russell had expected it. He said it was Dylan's move to smear the case and drag it out until people got bored. Delay, discredit, and deflect, he said. That's the playbook of every abuser who's ever had influence. But we had something Dylan didn't, the truth. And a growing group of people willing to risk everything to share it. Mark resurfaced publicly 2 days later. Against my advice, he posted an open letter online, apologizing for his part in Dylan's network, confessing to what he'd done, and offering the full evidence cache to the authorities. It went viral within hours. Media outlets finally had names, quotes, and a timeline. And that's when the dam broke. More women came forward. Anonymous accounts. Statements. A former HR assistant turned whistleblower. It wasn't just a few isolated incidents anymore. It was a systemic rot, stretching back years. People who had left the company started speaking out. Even a junior executive from the board agreed to testify, saying she had witnessed Dylan threatening an employee but had been told to stay quiet for the good of the brand. The company couldn't protect him anymore. Dylan was suspended. His name splashed across every business news outlet in the country. His attorney issued a weak statement denying the baseless accusations, but the public wasn't buying it. And yet, the victory didn't feel like I expected it to. I didn't feel triumph. I felt hollow. Lauren sat next to me on the couch that evening, both of us staring at the TV as a news anchor summarized the story. She looked over and asked, "Do you feel better?" I shook my head. "I feel finished. Not better. Just finished." We sat in silence for a long time. Then she whispered, "I never stopped loving you. Even after everything. I know it doesn't matter, but I need you to know it." I didn't respond right away, because part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me didn't. Part of me still ached for the man I used to be before any of this happened. Finally, I said the only thing I could. "I believe you. But love doesn't fix everything. Sometimes it's not enough." She nodded, tears falling again. But she didn't argue. She just leaned her head on my shoulder and stayed there. I let her. Not because I forgave her, but because in that moment, we were two people who had survived something ugly, and neither of us wanted to be alone anymore. 6 months passed. 6 months since the storm broke and swept through our lives, tearing down everything rotten that had festered beneath the surface for years. Dylan was officially charged with multiple counts of harassment, blackmail, and corporate misconduct. A dozen women testified. Mark's confession sealed the case. He took a plea deal, accepted his punishment, and vowed to spend the rest of his life making amends. And as for the company, its leadership board was forced to resign. New policies were put in place. A fund was created to support the women who had come forward. And me? I was free. Not in the cliché sense, like some dramatic movie ending, but in the quiet, meaningful way that actually matters. I could breathe again. I could look in the mirror and not see a man defined by betrayal. I could walk into a room without wondering who knew pieces of my past. I was whole again, not untouched, but real. And real was better. Lauren moved to a different city not long after the case ended. She said she needed space to heal, and I agreed. But before she left, we met one final time at a small park near my place. It was a clear, warm afternoon. No drama, no tension, just two people who had lived through hell and made it out the other side. I think about what we lost, she said quietly, watching ducks glide across the pond. But I also think about what we learned, about who we are now. I do too, I replied. And I don't hate you. I don't know if I ever truly did. I hated what happened. But you faced your demons. That matters. She turned to me, tears in her eyes. But this time they weren't sad. Just honest. I don't expect you to say it back, but I love you. And I always will. I smiled softly, gently. Maybe one day we'll meet again. And it'll feel like the first time. We hugged, and for the first time in years, it felt like something healing instead of something painful. She left that evening. And I stayed behind, not to grieve, not to wallow, but to begin again. These days, I've started my own small consulting firm. Nothing flashy. Just honest work with honest people. I mentor younger professionals, teach them how to lead without abusing power. I help others find their voice when they've been silenced. One of those interns asked me the other day, "Why do you do this? Why not take a bigger role somewhere else?" And I told him the truth. Because sometimes, rebuilding something slow and right is better than chasing what looks perfect from the outside. I still think about the past sometimes. About that night in the hotel lobby. About the sobbing. About the silence. But now, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't control me. It's just part of the road I had to walk to get here. And here? Here's good. Here's peace. Here's finally enough.